ambitious agenda, but it's an exciting agenda, a lot of exciting things to talk about. I'd like to begin with something that's not on the agenda before I read my statement. A special welcome to our Lieutenant Governor. Madam Lieutenant Governor, I didn't mention this last time we met, actually the time before when you joined us. Just want you to know, I think I speak on behalf of the entire board. We recognize that you have many, many obligations. And so you joining us is a real honor, and to have you a part of our board and as co-chair is a great thing for this project and for our work. So I hope you'll forgive me for not picking up on that recognition last time. We want to make sure that we do that this time. And in fact, I hope I don't put you on the spot, but would you like to say a few words to the group today? Would you mind?
Well, thank you, Representative Snow. And I am starting to kind of get used to being put on the spot all the time these days. So thank you for that. And honestly, I'm just excited to co-chair something with you again. For those of you who don't know, Representative Snow and I were co-chairs of the Education Interim Committee for a couple of years, and which ended when my service in the Senate, in the state Senate, ended at the end of last year. So I have a lot of love and respect and admiration for my good friend Lowry. We've done a lot of worked on a lot of important things together, and really, really happy to continue. And thank you all for your service. I'm excited about this project, and I'm really grateful for the hard work that everybody has put in so far. So I will stop there, and we can proceed with the meeting. But thanks for that welcome, Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor. It's a little hard for me to get used to not saying Deidre, so if I make that mistake, you'll forgive me. And I echo what you said about being able to work together on some really important things and help lead public education in our state. Was a real honor to work with you as well. So enough from that. We'll get to the part of the meeting that hopefully we don't have to deal with too many more times, is the meeting or the reading of our meeting determination. I'll go through that very quickly so that we get on to the business of our meeting. The meeting determination I executed on the 9th of April, 2021. It's part of the public notice and the agenda. It says this: I, Lowry Snow, co-chairman of the Point of the Mountain State Land Board, have determined that the April 13th, 2021 meeting of the board will be held electronically without an anchor location. This determination is based on the following facts. 1, Utah is currently dealing with COVID-19, which has been determined to be a pandemic. COVID-19 is contagious and can be deadly to those who contract it, especially those of advanced age and underlying health conditions. Number 2, state and county public health officials encourage residents to limit the size of public gatherings, wear masks, and maintain social distancing in public places. Number 3, a majority of agency staff and the members of the board are teleworking to avoid unnecessary contact with others. Number 4, this boardroom is insufficient. The boardroom is insufficient to allow social distancing and reasonably safe accommodation of the board and the public. Number 5, the board uses an electronic platform which allows interested parties to view the meeting, hear discussions, and provide written comment. As I said, that's dated to the 9th of April, 2021. And with having read that determination, we will move on to the substantive matters on our agenda, which, as I said, I think you're going to find them very interesting. We do have one matter. Well, let's move to public comment. I think we may have members of the public who've joined us. It is on our agenda to allow public comments subject to our rules of procedure. If there is a member of the public who has joined us and would care to speak, if you would let us know that, and let us know your name, and we'll give you an appropriate time to make a comment. So I may not be able to see you, but if you'll speak up, I'm happy to call on you. Not hearing any names and not having any other indication, we'll move past that item to the next matter on the agenda, which is to approve the minutes of our last 3 meetings. Our work has been really concentrated and has required a lot of engagement. Good work, but it's reflected in our minutes of March 9th, March 30th, and April 7th. I would entertain a motion to take those collectively, unless there are any, if there's any known problems with the minutes. Let me ask that question in advance of taking a motion. I don't hear any concerns voiced, so I would entertain a motion to consider adopting the minutes of all 3 of those meetings in one fell swoop.
So moved.
Is that David, Commissioner?
It is.
Do I have a second on that motion to approve these minutes?
Second, this is Steve.
Thank you, Representative Handy. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of all 3 meetings that I indicated. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say so. No opposition. The minutes are approved unanimously. So with that completed, there is a matter of, I guess, taking up a little bit more business on our agenda. Item number 4 is on the agenda to see if we might consider changing the time for our meeting. And this would be to accommodate certain of our board members. Instead of our traditional 2 to 4 p.m., we would like you to consider a 9 to 11 a.m. on the second Tuesday of each month. And I think our director, Alan, has reached out to all of us with an email. And I think generally there was an approval for that change. And I think it may make sense so that we continue to have engagement from all of our members. So I would entertain a motion, if we could get a motion on the floor, so to speak, and then we'll see if there's any discussion to the motion.
Mr. Chair, Mayor Walker, so moved.
Thank you, Mayor. The motion is then that we change our meeting times to 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on the second Tuesday. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, April. It's been moved and seconded. Now, is there any discussion to that motion that we should hear? Not hearing any comment, I will place it for a vote. All in favor of that motion to move our meeting accordingly to that time of day instead of as we currently have it, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and so we will make that change, and CC and Alan, as they notify us of the next meeting, we'll get that and be able to change our calendars. Thank you very much for that action. So Alan, this next item on the agenda, and I say Alan because I'm going to ask him for help. This next item is to have our board direction on the planning elements now to include in the stage 3 preferred plan. As you know, we worked on that item for the last 2 weeks to try to refine recommendations from our consulting team regarding those elements, and also to try to clarify and refine the comments of this board, which have been really important. So Alan, I know you asked me to kind of lay the groundwork for this next item that we're going to take up, but if it's okay with you, would you mind refreshing us and kind of bring us up to date, including talk about that really helpful email that you sent?
Be happy to. Thank you very much, Representative. And yeah, this is kind of a progression that we've been through. A couple of weeks ago, we met and Our consultants laid out the 3 concepts that we've been looking at and showed you how they perform based on some analysis relative to 25 key performance metrics. The meeting last week, we dedicated to listening a little bit more and having you respond to some specific recommendations. We got some good feedback from you on that. During the week, I sent out another email at your request to see if there was further discussion on any of those recommendations. We did not hear back. I think I heard from one who was supportive of the residential and commercial office balance. We took further input from our working groups, from our stakeholder advisory committee, from the public through the open house, and have put that together today. And you'll hear from SOM, our planning consultants, who will briefly go through those recommendations again, some little tweaks based on the input we got from you last time. But the hope is that through the discussion that we've had over several weeks, and especially the last 2 weeks, you may be ready to promote or suggest a motion that would advance various elements of these plans to our next stage, to a preferred alternative stage. So the goal is that in the next few weeks, we would be able to take the recommended elements and put them into another planning framework and share those with you, get further input and further refine it over subsequent stages of our planning process. So this is an important step. We hope that we've laid the groundwork over the last few weeks, but want to make sure that after you hear from SOM and Aaron Talkington, that you're able to have a discussion and feel comfortable with any recommendations you move forward. I might just remind you, this is certainly not the end. This is just moving us on to the next stage, and there will be much more discussion about the elements of the plan and how we can make it fit better with your vision and perform better. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for that background. Before I turn some time to Pete from SOM, in my opinion, I think it's going to be abundantly clear to us as we proceed through the agenda today that we have a need to refine or at least have a good concept decision at this point on our planning document. And we're starting to get interest. We're starting to get folks starting to approach Alan, and we're going to want to respond, and our process is going to be much more effective if we have even a preliminary plan. So this part of our discussion and action is going to be really important. So with that, Pete, we'll turn the time to you and have you pick up kind of where we left off last meeting and provide us any other background and information that we need to make some decisions.
Thank you, Representative Snow. I'll go ahead and share my screen and go to full screen. And I do want to reiterate, I think this is an important step in the process. And as we do gather more interest, it will be important to have a clear vision of where the board wants the project to go. We'll focus today primarily on the recommendations, but just to recap, I think everyone is well aware that in stage 2 of the master planning process, we did prepare 3 concepts, which are shown here. different physical designs for the site, but at the same time, they share many common attributes around walkability and in terms of defining a new development paradigm for this part of the Wasatch Front. The one on the left has the highest percentage of residential development, which we know is key to reducing traffic, but also providing that live-work environment we want. The concept on the right has the highest degree of commercial development, which we know aligns well with the foundational mandate from the state, which is to maximize or optimize the economic potential of the site. And I do want to reiterate that stage 3 will be about bringing the best ideas together into a single concept. So that is what the intention is today of the recommendations. Each concept has distinctive components. Each concept has unique characteristics that are of value to us. And the recommendations that we have here today, 13 of them related to the physical design, really pull from all the best attributes of each concept. The first recommendation is to have a very clear mixed-use business core in the project. We are recommending that there be a high-density core, and when I say high density, it's relative to what's around it, but it would be a distinctive focus of the plan to have a central, essentially a small central business district that provides a center to the project. The second recommendation, which has received a lot of favorable response, is an idea of a cross-industry innovation accelerator. So this is simply a portion of the plan where we would direct companies that are interested in the specific mission of innovation, whether that's product development or other types of innovation. We want to have a portion of the plan that is focused on that element. The third recommendation is to have an institutional affiliation. The precise characteristics of that affiliation we will further refine in stage 3, but again, the goal of having a specific place in the plan where institutions are welcome, and not only welcomed, but are part of the overall development vision for the project. One of the recommendations that received some comments last week at the board meeting was the percentage of residential. So we have refined, based on your feedback, the recommendation. We're currently suggesting that we target approximately 40 to 50% of the land area for residential land use. So this is not the overall GFA, the gross floor area of the project, it's the land area, with the note that this would be further refined in stage 3. So it may go down even a little bit further, depending on what we determine in stage 3 as an appropriate development mix. But the recommendation today is to target 40 to 50%. Recommendation 5 is to showcase some of the technology that's being developed in Utah right now around micromobility, these types of electric vehicle circulators. We think this project should be a showcase for this new technology, and perhaps even that's part of the innovation vision here, is to advance certain types of transportation technologies in the development of the project. Element number 6 is a retail and entertainment destination. This was determined in our analytics in stage 2 to really have a positive benefit on the overall traffic impacts of the project. If we can have a particular part of the project that meets the needs of the residents and employers and employees in the project through a slightly expanded retail and entertainment element, it really reduces offsite travel. It also provides a focal point for the surrounding communities to come here and spend an afternoon or an evening on the project site. Element number 7 is the river to range, what we call the greenway and trail, which is the open space connection through the site. This is one of the original concepts we've had for the project, that we want to link the Jordan River Greenway system to the Wasatch Foothill Trail systems. And this is a perfect place to do it. This has had a lot of positive response from the public. And also is a unique feature of the project, and I think will send the message and be a physical representation of the project's commitment to environmental issues and recreational assets. Recommendation number 8 has to do with the creation of a moderate-sized community park that would again serve the surrounding communities. The precise size, again, we can work on in stage 3 as we begin to refine the plan and develop the consolidated plan. But this also had a lot of positive response and can also serve multiple functions. It can function as a stormwater management area, it can function as a biohabitat restoration area, and then also a recreational amenity for the surrounding communities. Element number 9 was a central park. This acts as a focal point for the central business district, a civic hub for the surrounding communities, a place where folks can come and enjoy the day, enjoy a concert maybe in the evening, would have multiple functions, but it's primarily a civic space that would organize and focus the center of the project. Number 10 is pedestrian priority zones. And I think one of the missions of the original vision for the project is to create a physical environment that is unique in the Wasatch Front. So one that is focused on people, pedestrian activities. You can see here families who may come here for an afternoon. So really putting this as a primary characteristic of the project, I think would go a long ways towards making this a very special project. Element number 11 is what we call distinct districts and subcenters. This really has 2 ideas. So the idea of a distinct district is taking this very large site, 600 acres, and breaking it into smaller pieces. And the advantage of that is it allows us to do more detailed programming of these smaller districts. And when I say smaller, they're still quite large, 50 to 75 acres in general. So this allows us to target specific industries. It may align with institutional or innovation functions, as we talked about earlier. So it just gives us a lot more flexibility. And then the idea of smaller subcenters inside of these allows employees and residents to have access to local serving retail. So they, again, don't have to travel off-site to meet their daily needs. Another popular item that fits in with our mobility strategy is providing what we're calling pedestrian linkages throughout the plan. So the ability to move through the project without having to use an automobile. So these would either be for purely pedestrian only, or they may be shared with bike paths. But the idea that you can connect to any district from any other district without a car. And then finally, 13 is neighborhood parks or district parks. This aligns with the district center idea. These are quite small open spaces that would have neighborhood serving functions, or would be for employees to have midday lunches out. So they, again, are relatively small and are specific to different locations in the plan. So we really feel good about these 13 recommendations. I think it captures a lot of the essential and best attributes of stage 1 and 2, and many of the public comments that we've heard. So these are the recommendations we're putting forward today. And the great thing is that they all can fit on the site, and we've actually tested to make sure that they can do that. So this is a drawing that illustrates how these 13 elements would fit, and we believe very strongly that we can still meet the development objectives of the project and the economic objectives of the project, and accommodate these 13 elements in the plan. So this is simply a test fit, not meant to be a final proposal for stage 3. Stage 3 will be actually refining and doing some variations on this plan. So Aaron, maybe you could touch on a few of the recommendations and processes from the financial evaluation.
Sure, I'm happy to. And, I think we went into detail in these in the last meeting. And so I'm going to refrain from digging back in on the model. But, I think what I'd like for this group and for others listening to know is that we have done a detailed economic comparison of these scenarios, comparing, the different programs and the revenues generated by those against the estimated costs of the infrastructure and the parks that are shown in each scenario. So we flip the slide. We've produced at a very high level, an economic analysis that kind of captures these different pieces, right? Understanding the different buckets of costs that we've looked at and that were identified in phase 2 against those revenues. At a high level, we believe that each of these 3 schemes from an urban design perspective has the ability to produce, additional land value beyond the costs. And that the infrastructure costs and the different components proposed, can be covered or paid for by the value generated on site. And so this to us suggests that the overall decision is not necessarily, is one of these scenarios good or bad, but really does start to get to the different elements that Pete described, and we have some flexibility to really make decisions on those elements without worrying that a particular decision has a major cost implication. We flip. The other thing that we've done is at a very high level, done a quick comparison of these scenarios on the economic impact, not on the land value. And you'll notice that, on concepts 1 and 2, which have a little bit more park space, obviously there's a somewhat lower job creation or spending or property value created compared to concept 3, which has more developable acres. And so all of these have a significant benefit to the state and to the broader area. But more real estate development and especially more jobs and more retail, do generate a higher impact. We flip. Overall, our conclusions in the economic analysis support moving forward with the planning recommendations. One of the things I think to highlight is, that these are, longer term development concepts. Each of these concepts, is about 25 years of development, and that could be quickened depending on the different proposals and economic development concepts we move forward with, or, it could be slowed depending on how many different, the balance of land use and how many different elements we consider on site, or how quickly we decide to push density. And so, really our key conclusion is that all of these concepts have merit from an economic perspective. There is a point at which, especially you see in concept 2, the large park, sports park that was identified does start to take away potential value without really, and increases the infrastructure costs. And so there are some elements like that in future scenarios, if we decide to move forward with those elements, we'll want to make sure that we're recouping the costs of those facilities in other ways, or thinking about other ways to fund them. But as an overarching direction, we would also really encourage this group to think about economic impact in addition to land value, because over time, the economic impact of the site is going to be far greater than just the direct land value realized by the state. And our recommendations from an economic perspective largely support some of the things that Pete has already shared. We do think it's important for the site to include an anchor and an institutional use as a component of the program. We think that as they've already shown in this proposed potential concept, that we need to rethink exactly what that 50-acre sports park in concept 2 is. Maybe it's not really a sports park, maybe it's smaller. And there's some various options, I think that we can really address in phase 3 to reconsider what that really looks like. And in addition, we support the idea that a minimum of 55 or 60% of the site really should be reserved for real estate development. And that's to support the costs of building the open space and the infrastructure. Not because we necessarily think that real estate development on this site is the end all be all, but that's where we find the balancing point of the value creation and the economic impact, really begins to offset and support paying for all of these other priorities that we have that do cost money. Within that, strategies that reduce parking needs. So the circulator we are showing, really thinking about the BRT route and the location of those stations. All of those items will have a significant impact on the land value if we can use them to reduce parking needs. And so I think that's something that we'll really look into in phase 3, but it's partly why we continue to think about options like the circulator and how the BRT will work within the site. I think finally our analysis suggests that a balanced land use mix really will be important for this area as an innovation community, and that leaning too far towards housing or too far towards office will actually slow down the rate at which we can build the site and not necessarily produce the overall goals that we're trying to achieve here. And finally, I think the way to use the economic analysis within this context of thinking about should we move forward these planning recommendations, is to understand that the economic impact and the cost benefit of the development relates to more than just the land value and the infrastructure. So we're really recommending that over time, as we evaluate scenarios in the next phase, that we really use direct economic impact as an equally important metric, once we've determined that the scenarios are at least cost neutral from a development perspective. But overall, our recommendations of the economic analysis support moving forward with the principles that Pete has outlined.
Thank you, Aaron. So Representative Snow, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Peter and Aaron. That is really helpful I think in terms of narrowing where we are and helping us to make some choices. I think there are some questions from the board, and it looks like Representative Handy, your hand is up.
Thank you. My handy hand is up. I've used that before, sorry. Listen, Aaron, this 50% to 55 to 60%, you're using, I think, and maybe I'm just missing this, a kind of a different term. You said reserved for real estate development. Does that mean residential development?
No, that means all development.
Okay.
Right? That means not parks, not transit,
Okay.
not roads, not amphitheaters, all the goodies that we want to include on the site that enhance the community and serve a broader public purpose, but don't necessarily generate revenue.
Okay, that makes me more comfortable. Thanks for helping me understand that, Aaron. Thanks.
Of course.
And if I could just add a point, if I could, and that is just as a rule of thumb, when we do sort of master plan, community design and planning, we end up with about 60% net revenue producing, maybe 55, 60, 65% by the time you take out schools, parks, backbone infrastructure, storm, all that other stuff that it takes. So basically what's being recommended is generally in the ballpark of what is standard in the industry for net developable, maybe just a smidgen less because there's a little bit more of a public, I think realm, focus here than the conventional, community.
Thank you, Peter, for that, and Representative Handy, thanks for your question. Other questions from the board about where we are with respect to Pete's explanation on the elements and Aaron's recommendations? Let me ask Aaron, on your recommendations, that last one that we're looking at, the direct economic impact. Let me see if I think I understand what you're saying there. But I want to, I think what you're saying is as the development moves forward, there comes a point in time where it becomes cost neutral. Is that correct?
Right. What I'm suggesting is that there's really multiple ways that the site generates revenue for the state. Right. There's the actual land value when you transact, whether that's a sale or a lease. Right. Somebody, thinks that the land is, is worth more than the cost to build something and to build the infrastructure. And we've checked that box. All three of these scenarios we can support from that perspective. Economic impact becomes about what you build and how long it generates, and how much revenue you generate off of what you build. And so that's things like property taxes and income taxes and jobs and, sales tax and some other, finer grained details. But, direct economic impact is kind of that perpetual revenue generation that happens year after year because you have people and activity happening at the site. And that metric varies a lot based on the density of what you build and the mix of residential and commercial.
Okay. Other board members have questions? Let me ask a few more for me and maybe board members. Pete and Aaron, the decision that is now before us as a board, or this planning process that is before us and needs to make some decisions or a decision. What is it that you need, Pete, as planner, for us to decide today that helps move to the phase 3 or stage 3? Do you understand my question?
Well, I think if I can, I'll just back up a little bit. As planners today, it would be great to get agreement from the board on the 13 recommendations, that there's no dispute on any of those. That's really all we need, I think, from a physical planning standpoint. Some of the numeric variation that we've talked about, whether it's revenue, land cost, percentage of developable, those are elements we will continue to explore in stage 3. So we're not asking for a final decision today on some of those more flexible numeric outcomes. It's really agreement with the general physical elements, and that's so that the planning team can stay on schedule and deliver a consensus framework plan at the end of the schedule.
All right, and so with respect to, I think your explanation really helps, but with respect to moving forward, but still providing some flexibility. For example, the percentage of residential, 40 to 50, we would still have some discussion on that issue. That's not set in concrete, deciding what we say today. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the recommendation is generally to target 40 to 50% residential land use, with an asterisk that states that that'll continue to be refined in stage 3.
Okay,
And if I could, this is Steve again. Part of the purpose of stage 3 is to continue to game the land use program. Is to that's why we want to leave a little wiggle room here, because we want to go through the plan again now that we have sort of a general set of framework components, and push density on an alternative. Maybe play with that mix a little bit more. Better define the retail component, and get a little bit deeper into the different housing types and the different office building types. And so the whole purpose of this next stage is to sort of go through the plan again and game some of these variations of land use mix and density, and see what the implications are on the economics and on traffic and on some of the other metrics that we've been using to test the plans.
thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
At least as I understand it, what we're involved is a narrowing process that was going to provide our planners with the additional information so that they know that the direction they're moving is consistent with where the elements that we've identified or helped them identify. So other questions of our planners or our consultants? Steve, Representative Handy.
Okay, here I go again. So I just clarified with Aaron, 50 to 60% of residential proposed for residential or proposed for real estate development.
Real estate.
Are you now saying that of that 50 to 60%, that 40 to 50% of that would be residential?
That's correct. Yeah. And Steve, maybe I can, so the 55 to 60% that Aaron talked about is the entire site, right? So that's everything. The 40 to 50% we're talking about is of that 55 to 60%.
Right.
So that this is what we call net developable. So we're saying of the net developable, 40 to 50% of that would be targeted for residential. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So also, I don't want to speak for Pete, but reminding everyone that based on his experience, and Steve Kellenberger, you may want to weigh in on this too, but as I understand it, based on this kind of a large scale planned development, that target of that percentage for development, excluding open spaces, parks, schools, that's fairly consistent in the industry. At least I think I'm hearing Pete say that.
Yeah, that's what Steve said, and I would second that. Absolutely. 60% developable is a very common and appropriate target for a project of this scale.
So thank you. And I made a mistake as to who said that. So
Yeah. No, it's good.
Any other questions? I don't want to be the only one dominating this discussion, but I had some questions, but I don't want to cut it off. But we are looking to see if we can't get a motion on the table that confirms these 13 elements, recognizing Representative Handy and others that this slide that's in front of us, this 40 to 50%, is only a concept at this point, and that's not been set in stone. And it may be that the target is closer to 40% than 50%. That's just me speaking, no one else.
Yeah. And we probably should have added a word here that says net land area. So just for further clarification. So in terms of the overall percentage of the entire site, that would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30%, as you can see from this graphic down here, the relative impact of that residential.
The gross size would be closer to that 25 to, what did you say?
Yeah, 25 or so.
Okay.
This is Mayor Walker. I have a question. So you're asking us in a motion to come up to approve all of the 13 elements. The only element I really have a lot of heartburn with, well, two, this Jordan River Parkway element. I'm not supportive of that. And the second one is I'm not supportive of 50% residential. And so I guess if the motion is going to include that, I'm going to be a no vote on it. I don't like the, are you saying we're locking in on this Jordan River Parkway business? I'm okay with this Jordan River Park. I'm okay with the Central Park. I get that concept, but this is too much open park space in my mind, just over on, on that sort of northeast side.
So Pete, if you could address, or Aaron, whoever, there's two issues there. One is if we approve the recommended elements, are we locking in on the Jordan River Park? And are we locking in on the 50% residential?
In my opinion, these are simply guidelines. And I think, as you said, Representative Snow, appropriately, this is simply a narrowing of the range of investigations that the design team will look at. So I would say these are not fixed or locked in any manner. And I think part of stage 3 would actually be to look with Aaron at the financial implications of this Jordan River Park. And we can make a determination in stage 3 whether it goes away, whether it gets smaller, what the final permutation is around that.
So I would just add that when we started with this park component, it started at 100 acres, and then it went to 75. But then, based on the input from the board last week, we draw it because there was interest in having the park, but there was interest in not having it be so large.
Yeah.
So we had a range prior to like 40 to 75. So as a response from the board, we've reduced the size down to say around 40. So there's been a significant reduction in its size based on, but on the other hand, the reason, there seemed to be enough interest to keep it in as a component. And I would just note that, the community here, the residential community, as well as the business community, does need some sports fields. Otherwise it's out of balance with the surrounding area. What this size park would do would be, it would keep it from becoming one of these big regional sports complexes and have it be more of a community park that is meeting the needs of this project, along with maybe some ecological and some stormwater and some day use areas. So it's a pretty toned down, component compared to where it started, if that helps at all.
This is April. I have a couple questions.
Okay.
So what's the total acreage if we add up all the neighborhood parks, the Jordan River Community Park, and also some of the trails or greenways, so that we kind of have an idea how much of this area that we're dedicating towards open space? Then secondly, when someone is ready to make a motion, can we just say that we want to keep all these elements in our further investigation of stage 3, but yet that doesn't mean that we're keeping any of those elements permanently, nor are we keeping the acreage or percentage necessarily that's dedicated to them, but just so that we can continue to study it out a little bit?
Let me comment on the procedural issue. I think that's an appropriate motion. The question will be whether or not that motion and action, if it's in the affirmative, gives our planners the tools to move things to the next stage. But to answer your question, April, that's appropriate. But getting to the other, let's come back to that and let our planners see if they can answer your first question.
Well, and one more thing to note, because in my mind, we're still in framework stage. We're not really supposed to have complete definitive plans in the stage we're in right now. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And we
So-
also have to keep in mind that as we bring master developers on board, they're got a lot of their own ideas in terms of how to, make these various districts work from an economic standpoint. And so we need to expect a little push and pull, at that stage as well.
So let's, Steve or Pete, can you help April with her first question? And April, I'm going from memory, but I think it was, what was the gross acreage for the parks? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
because Jordan River Park is one, but then we've got a Central Park where we were talking about little neighborhood parks. By the time you add it all up, I still don't know how many acreage we're putting into.
Yeah, so April, in this plan, which was again a test fit just to make sure we could accommodate all of the things we're talking about, it's 148 acres of green area of open space. So everything you see colored green on here equals 148.7. And that includes the Central Park, the River to Range Greenway, the community park. As Steve said, that's 40 acres, not 50 as was noted in Aaron's presentation. So that's gotten smaller. And currently we're at 56% of the site area as developable area. So we talked about 55 to 60. This drawing illustrates 56. So we're in that range, and we feel strongly, and part of what stage 3 will be about is bumping that number a little bit higher. I'd like to get it a little bit closer to 60% because I think that's fits with the original mandate from the state.
Okay.
But I believe we could still do all of these elements and get it closer to 60% and have these great amenities, but also meet the development goals for the project.
Yeah, because in theory, I'm thinking, okay, if we have 148 acres of open space, and let's say of the developable area of 338 acres, let's say 43% of that went to residential, then we'd have 148 acres of residential. So for every acre that you have a house or condos or residential, you've got an equal acre of parks and open space. It's a lot of open space then if we're almost 1-to-1 to open space to residential.
Well, let me give you a calculation as a benchmark.
Yeah, I
generally,
calculated 338 developable areas times 43% to residential, which would equal 148 acres of residential. And if we have 148 acres of open space, all I'm saying is the plan that we're going in right now, we're about 1-to-1. For every acre of residential, we've got an acre of park. And that leaves about 190 acres for commercial and retail development. I just want to make sure we're not narrowing it down too quickly. And as Mayor Walker said, that we don't start getting a bunch of no's at this point on votes, because I think we still need to be a little bit more open-minded. We still need to talk to educational institutions and some companies about headquartering in here and seeing if this is going to work.
Those are good points. Let's go to, let me just say, from a procedural standpoint, we don't have to have a motion. We don't have to make a motion and decide action. I think what the planners are saying, they've been given a fairly ambitious time frame to move this forward, and they're wanting the board to help with the next where they need to go next, and they need input. But with that, let me go to Senator Fillmore. I think you have your hand up.
I do, Chair, and thank you. I like the Jordan River Park, but my question on that, as well as some other things, is like, we can plan a park, but we have to have somebody who's willing to build and program and maintain a park. And really, that's true with every element of this design. But when it comes to something like a park, it's not going to be a state park, right? So ultimately, Draper City is going to be tasked with building the park and maintaining the park. And if there's going to be any activities going on at the park, programming it. I guess if I'm hearing from the mayor of that great city that that's not something that he's into, that gives me a little bit of pause, even though I wish he was into it. I guess that's just a comment. I would love to understand a little bit better. We don't need to take time in this meeting to educate the ignorant, bakery man about how this works. But, we can set goals for what our programming ought to be, but we've got to have partners who are willing to achieve each of these goals, which I think gets to April's point a little bit, that, we need to know if the path we're heading down is a path that our development partners are going to be into. Otherwise, there's not much point in continuing until we have that information.
Thanks, Senator Fillmore. I think Steve Kellenberg, I think you were in the process of saying something.
Well, I had 2 points I was going to make. One was I just did a rough calculation of what tips, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure what the park requirement is in the valley, but in most places that generally runs about 5 acres per 1,000 population of residents. And if you do the map on a 40% land allocation for residential, it comes out at about 90 to 100 acres of park that would typically be required for the residential component at 5 acres per 1,000 population. And so I'm just giving that to you as a benchmark. Now, what that doesn't do, it doesn't include, that would be sort of park code type park with active recreation. Now, what we have a central park, we have a river, a riverine open space with biofiltration. There are other components in this plan that would be additive to that. And I think that's kind of how you get to the number, that we're kind of hanging around at here. And the second point I would say is that, again, part of your direction could be that in stage 3, we evaluate an opportunity that has a much reduced park. And we also have make sure we have an alternative that has a reduced residential count, to be responsive to the 2 concerns that have been made. That's what that stage 3 is for, is to create that ability to test scenarios that are responsive to your thoughts and concerns.
So Steve, what you're saying, I believe, is that those issues, even if we move forward to this phase 3 or stage 3, those issues are still on the table.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing you, and we're saying, okay, we're gonna have a scenario that, and actually we're excited about doing a scenario that really does kind of optimize economic development potential for the site, and by having one that reduces the park size a bit and reduces the residential component down to the 40% maximum, that would be a very interesting scenario for us to test. We should do that.
And with respect to the point that Senator Fillmore made, at some point along the way, we have to look at, and maybe earlier than later, about the appetite for Draper City or Salt Lake County to participate in these parks, especially the Jordan River Parkway.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of communities, master plan communities, take some of that burden off of the local city by having a master association for its residents and its workers that absorb some of that maintenance cost. So we can keep that option in mind as well.
Thank you. Other questions?
Do you mind if I respond a little bit to Senator Fillmore's question earlier?
Please, Aaron.
So I do want to remind you all, partly why we showed some of the economic analysis as part of these planning guidelines is to emphasize that we are thinking about how this gets implemented. And while we're not putting specific numbers on these scenarios today, if there was something in here that I truly believed based on our experience and our modeling that we couldn't achieve, I would tell you. There are a lot of implementation questions to flesh out, right? Whose park is it? How much does it cost to build? What do we really do there? How big is it? Who operates and maintains it? Those questions are all still on the table for us to explore in phase 3 or stage 3. And so, what I think we really need to hear from you all today is if no one cares about that park, or everybody feels that we should be targeting lower residential, right, or something else, understanding where those priorities lead us is I think one of the most important elements of what will help us move forward, even if there's lots of things that we still want to test or continue to evaluate.
Thank you, Erin. Other questions or comments from the board?
Could I come back in, Representative? Mayor Walker?
Absolutely, Mayor Walker.
I wasn't, to Senator Fillmore's point, I wasn't thinking about it from the concept of maintenance and construction. I'm not opposed to the space being preserved. I guess my question is, I think having that much, if what you're trying to do is bring in the element, and perhaps that could be a different kind of park, like the one I really like, which would maybe be the Padres or some other type of park like that. I'm down with saving that space. But if what you're saying is we've got to approve the element as a community park, I don't know that, I've never envisioned this site being a bunch of open space. I've always envisioned it being a place of great economic opportunity and commerce. And I'm supportive of the Central Park concept. I love the river to range concept. I like that part there, but these kind of big open, grassy water parks are there. We have a lot of them in the county. They're expensive. They're hard to maintain. That's an element for sure. But that was just never what I had envisioned for this site, was it was going to have, something like that. I mean, the Jordan River Parkway Trail, for most of it, is already a very nice river park and lots of spots. But I mean, I guess if what you're saying is the Jordan River Community Park is a loosely defined space area over there, I could be supportive. But if we have to define it as specifically a community park like that, that's what my issue is.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't want to speak for Erin, but let me see if I understand her prior comment. If we move to stage 3, and we're looking at scenario layouts, they are still scenarios. And I believe what Erin said is, if it's the position of the board that we don't want any park there, the stage 3 can be adjusted to accommodate that. Did I say that correctly, Erin?
Yes. If collectively you all say that that's not important to you, I think that would be helpful feedback.
So
but if there's still a lot of questions around it, right? Then I think as it's been framed, the recommendation to the planning team might be, well, let's continue to evaluate what that is, and we can show you some options that have it and some options that don't have it.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Representative Handy.
Can there be any, or have there been any real world tests on these concepts with people who are actually in the development community? I mean, I'm listening to Mayor Walker. I hope all of you understand. I said this before. I'm really not comfortable with the 40 to 50% residential. I thought we were talking about job creation here, but I know the modeling, how to pay for this, et cetera, et cetera. But can this be tested, these concepts, with the development community? Is there any way to do that, to test this better with those people who would actually be capitalizing something like this or investing in this, rather than board members who we're trying to do the best we can, of course, but we're not developers. I don't know who that question goes to, Chair Snow, but I'm just, anyone.
Well, let me respond to the best that I can. I still have a tremendous amount of confidence in the consultants that we have on board, and they all come with real world experience and a very incredible depth of experience. And so that's one of the reasons why we have them here. But the second thing I would say too is, remember, as part of this offering process that is currently underway, there's two parts of that. One is to entertain interest out there, but the second one, which is as important, if not more important, is to get their input, Representative Handy. So when they come in and look at where we are with our scenarios, which is going to be still very flexible in terms of a design. If they say, if a developer says, I'd really like to have something significant on the west side, but you've got that park, there's nothing set in concrete that says the park couldn't be reduced or modified. That's my understanding. So when we're talking about moving to phase 3, we're not talking final Mylar drawing that is set in concrete, approved by a city council or a county that says this is it and has to be come back to that body for amendment. It is a very still flexible plan that allows us to move forward and then make and deliver information to proposed developers. But if I've misstated the depth or experience of our consultants on that issue, please speak up.
Maybe I could just jump in and reinforce what you said. Certainly, we do have consultants with a lot of real world experience, and the projects have to pencil out. They have to be reflective of real world conditions or they don't work. But we have issued this request for expression of interest to the development community, and we're expecting responses on Thursday to that request. We'll then start the process of identifying those that we will have further conversations with. And so Representative Handy, that's specifically what we're doing over the next few weeks to get developer input on the plans and on our thoughts about deal structure and land disposition.
That helps. That adds to my comfort level. Thank you, Alan.
Other comments or questions?
So the concept is we're still going to have the immense amount of flexibility if we want to approve something going forward to give the consultants further a road to go down. I'm not locking myself in if I make a motion that it has to be a specific type of use on that property.
That's my understanding, Mayor. And I just reinforce what Alan said and I said, is that we are going to be getting really important feedback from developer community on what this looks like, and there's nothing that is locking us into some plan that we can't modify depending on what that feedback is. And by the way, Mayor, let me go so far as to say that we have appreciated the ongoing input of Draper City, and that doesn't mean that we can't continue to take that input in modifying as well.
Are you ready for a motion, Mr. Chair?
I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I move that we as a board approve this consolidated plan with the elements with flexibility with respect to what exactly goes on the space programmed as Jordan River Community Park, that still be open and flexible to other uses, and that we direct the planners to move towards a residential component around the 40% mark. All other elements, I would motion that we approve to move forward in the planning stage.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me see if I can restate the motion. Motion is that that we approve to this point the potential consolidated plan that's on our screen with the elements indicated, on the condition that with respect to the Jordan River Community Park, that is still subject to discussion as to whether or not it remains as part of the plan, and also discussion about the percentage of the development that would be for residential, and that while it's been expressed here as 40 to 50%, that would still be subject to discussion. Did I state that correctly, Troy?
Yeah, and preserving, of course, the space of the park for even a future type of plan. But yes.
Right. To be subject to further planning. That's the motion that's on the table. Do I have a second?
This is Mayor Ramsey. I would be happy to second that motion.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. I won't try to restate the motion, but I think you heard it. Discussion to that motion from any of the board members.
If I can speak to my motion, I like.
Yeah, yes, you can. I should have allowed you to do that, Mayor, so please
I
do.
like the elements. Like I said, I like the river to range. I like the Central Park. I like the concept of some activity over on this Jordan River Community Park area. I also like the concept of all the concepts, the circulator, the ability to have flexibility in residential and then economic development. I appreciate the work. Again, I'm not giving up on my professional sports hope that's a great size spot for that, and that can be right by the river, and you can enjoy that and the river. But I do appreciate the good work that's gone in. I think as we take input from our local development community and consider the future, we'll be able to come around with some good plans that'll hopefully achieve our goal.
Thank you, Mayor, for your comments in support of your motion. Further discussion to the motion from any of the board members? I'll place the motion for a vote. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. This is important discussion, and I probably said enough, but it will still be, in my mind, we'll still have a significant amount of flexibility as we move forward. I really appreciate the board's input and the consultants' help in helping us get to this point. So the next matter on the agenda, moving forward, is a request to abandon an easement. Let me find my notes here. You may recall at our last meeting that our board member, Jim Russell, at the very end of the meeting shared that some of our neighbors are requesting that the state abandon an easement affecting the point. I'll introduce or turn some time over to Ron Jeffs in just a minute, who is with DFCM, who will provide us the background on this request and seek our approval to abandon the easement. So with that, Ron, I think I saw your name. We'll turn the time to you and allow you to help us understand that issue.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for that brief introduction. I appreciate that. As you mentioned, I am a real estate project manager with the real estate program with DFCM, and Lee Fairborn, my supervisor, and my director, Jim Russell, are both present in this Zoom meeting as well. I brought this matter before Mike Kelly, our assistant AG, and he said, because the grantee of these easements that were put in place in 1941 lists the Department of Corrections, the prison, it ought to be something that this body makes a decision on. And I hope that Mike is present in this meeting. As I've researched this project and this issue, I've come across Fred Donaldson. He's also an assistant attorney general, and he's with the Department of Natural Resources. And he knows a lot about this easement and the associated pipeline. And I've invited him to be present to add to the comments that I'm going to share with you, as well as be there to field any questions that you have. And so with that introduction, let me see if I can share the screen with you. Can everyone see that?
We can, Ron.
Okay, perfect. So I have a purpose in this presentation, and that's to demonstrate the need to assist Draper City residents who are to build additions on their homes or build garages or outbuildings on their property. because of this easement, they're unable to do that. To show that this easement and water pipeline to the prison property has outlasted its useful life, and just show that the existing pipeline and easement are more of a liability and has no sustainable value. So what I'd like to accomplish in this meeting, the objective that I have, is to see if POMSLA can do the following. Since the easement is mostly not on the prison property, determine as a board if this easement issue is something they need to resolve or refer it to DFCM or another state agency to solve. Or if you determine as a board that this easement should be abandoned, make an assignment to one of the board members to evaluate and resolve the issues. If we're unable to do one of those things today, I would ask for an action on the following, that we can decide upon and authorize and delegate to DFCM to resolve the current and urgent homeowner issues. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So here's the description of the easement. You see that it starts on the far right there in the Little Willow Canyon, and it goes right through all the middle of the residential properties through Draper City, and eventually stubs in at the prison property. Here's the start and finish point of the easement. I took a couple of slides. And by the way, these slides were prepared by a DNR employee or employees in about 2014. And they were in possession of Assistant AG Fred Donaldson, and he shared these with me. On the left, you have the start of the easement right there in the canyon, Little Willow Canyon. And on the right side, it shows where it goes along the south and east side of Interstate 15. And then at the exit to the prison, shoots across all the lanes and stubs in at the prison property. Here's two more diagrams of the actual easement somewhere in the middle. You'll see on the slide on the left, over the years, the Department of Corrections or the state or whoever associated with the state who has managed this easement has worked with developers in moving the easement. As you can see, it's not a straight line on the slide on the left. And the slide on the right will show you, especially when it jogs and goes more in a westerly direction, that this easement goes right through the middle of Draper City residents' homes. And it's typical that easements are on the perimeter of their lots, right? So a little bit about the easement history. It's a 6-inch buried pipeline and easement and extends from Little Willow Canyon to the prison property, which is approximately 6 miles. It was created in 1941 when all the properties were agricultural. It runs through the middle of the residential properties, not along the property lines. And as the actual deeds themselves say, it has a narrow scope of use. It's only for water transportation. So you have no other utility value, for example, gas, cable, electric, fiber optics, walking or biking trails. And the language on the document itself mentions the following: that the grantee, which is the Department of Corrections, the prison, of the easement shall compensate grantor at a reasonable appraised valuation for any damages done to grantor's land or crops caused by grantee in the construction, maintenance, repair, and operation of said pipeline. And as you can see, it dealt with crops. These days, we're dealing more with roads and fences and yards and so on and so forth. A little bit more about the easement. It was the source of water for the prison site until about 1983 when they received alternative culinary water. Since then, it's only been irrigation water that has been transported across the easement. Water Right Little Willow Irrigation Company of 217.91 acre feet annually has been associated with this easement. And the Department of Corrections conveyed ownership of this water right to the Department of Natural Resources, the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands in 2002 for irrigating their greenhouse. In May of last year, 2020, FFSL leased the water right to Draper Irrigation Company on a permanent basis with automatic 5-year renewals. On June 30th of last year, the water ceased from being transported across the easement to the prison site. And the Draper Irrigation Company has filed and was approved a change application with the Utah Division of Water Rights for that 217 acre-feet of water annually. Here's kind of a contrast to what we had back in 1941 when the prison was pretty lonesome. It was clear out there in the Never Never Land. You'll see on the photo on the left that not even Interstate 15 had been built yet, compared to the photo on the right, which shows it is as it is today. I have to disclose to you that the picture on the left was actually taken in the 1960s. So I couldn't even find a photo that dated back to 1941. So even in the 1960s, there's quite a contrast there. So my final slide, is there value to the easement? Just some thoughts to that question. The water will be supplied to the prison site for new development by either Draper Irrigation Company or Draper City or both. And the Department of Corrections is also purported to have some water from the East Jordan Canal Company. The cost to maintain this easement through the middle of hundreds of residential properties is cost inhibited. And the water that was attached to the easement has been leased long-term to the Draper Irrigation Company. This easement is narrow in scope. It can only be used for the transportation of water. And it will never be used to transport culinary water unless it's treatable. And the cost of treatment facility would be cost inhibited. And not likely there's a cost savings of transporting irrigation water across this easement to the prison site. So with that, I would ask Fred Donaldson if he has anything to add to this as the Assistant Attorney General who's worked with this a little bit with the Department of Natural Resources, and then also if there are questions from the board regarding this easement.
Thanks, Ron. Fred here. And I appreciate Ron reaching out to me. He's been dealing with this for the last couple of months, and I've been dealing with this for the last probably 10 years or so, as we've been approached by individuals and property owners who are desirous to move the location of the pipeline around buildings and other structures on their lands. And we've also had to deal with leaks that have occurred that have caused damage to roads and other structures. And so the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands operated a nursery at the point of the mountain where they originally were growing native plants and flowers for reseeding projects related to wildland fires that had occurred. And since probably, I think it was 2000, we closed the nursery, and I think we gave a lease essentially to an individual to continue to operate the nursery, but the function of using those plants of selling them to the public or using them for our reseeding projects is no longer needed. And so the decision was made a couple of years ago that to close the nursery and shut it down. And so that's what's happened. And in any case, the water that was flowing through the pipeline, a lot of it has already been diverted and has already been leased even long-term to places like the golf course over in Draper, a little bit farther to the east, and then again to the Little Willow Irrigation Company. Our lease that we did for Forestry, Fire, and State Lands was, I think, for 3 CFS of water. It was very small amount of water. that they agreed to compensate us for yearly and maintain our water right on. So I would just echo what Ron said, that this easement and this pipeline is more of a liability than an asset. We begged Draper Irrigation Company when we were doing the lease of the water right, we begged them to take the pipeline and they refused. They didn't want anything to do with the pipeline because they themselves view it as a liability. So with that, Ron, I hope that's enough information, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can, and I'm sure Ron feels the same way.
Does that, Ron, conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does, Chair Snow.
Thank you very much. And Fred, thank you for assisting. Let me start by asking a question, then we'll turn it over to board members. To board member Jim, based on your understanding on these presentations, if the board were to abandon our rights to this easement, are we giving up? It sounds like we may be not giving up much value, but limiting our potential liability. How do you assess that?
Agree with that statement. So the particular acreage or the portion of the easement that is on the site, the point site, is not significant in size. There's over 5 miles getting there from the canyon. But if you vacate any portion of that easement, now the easement is no longer valuable at all. So you could construe there would be value there in that easement, but like has been presented, there's virtually no other use for that easement other than delivering water. And so it just seems like it's a liability of having, more than it is value to the point.
Thank you. And then Ron and Fred, if the water right has been transferred to DNR and they hold that, and I'm assuming that they were utilizing the easement for a time for delivering the water, do they also have to be a party to an abandonment?
Well, that's a good question, and it's a legal question that I think that Mike Kelly with the FCM and I can work through. When we were approached, we have been approached by landowners who have wanted us to abandon the easement, and we've actually done abandonments of this easement, or rather, but then had them grant a different easement around their property. And as we've done that, we've just acted on behalf of the state of Utah. So I don't know the names on the easement. I think it's corrections. I think there's some that's state land board. I think there's probably some that's the Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands, but it's all the state of Utah acting on behalf of the state of Utah. So I'm not sure. I think as long as the authority has the ability to do that, I think we're okay.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board about this requested action?
I have a question. If you're abandoning an easement and we have pipe like underneath somebody's ground, does the person that's abandoning the easement have any obligation to go remove the materials? Can the homeowners come and now say they're trying to do stuff and they want us to spend the money to remove it at all these locations? Or does that not even play?
Fred, if it's okay, I'll kind of dive in with the answer to this question, because I've thought about that quite extensively. And with consultation with my supervisor, Lee Fairborn, this would be too massive of an undertaking to globally abandon this easement, because we don't understand or have all the documentation that describes all of the easement. If you think about it, back in 1941, one document would concern one property owner. And as in the 80 years that have transpired, you've had these big agricultural plots subdivided into several residential properties that pertain to one legal easement document. So our thoughts is that when it becomes a problem, Draper City and the state of Utah would address it as it became known that it's an issue. Like the person we have in Draper right now, he's not able to get a building permit to build onto his house. And we can just release that easement one at a time and say the pipe is yours. We're not going to do anything about the pipe. You take on all the responsibility of whatever you need to do with the pipe, but we're just telling you that we don't have a claim to that easement anymore. So it should be cost effective, just the cost of recording a deed. And I don't think they charge the state of Utah for that.
Just to add on to what Ron said, yeah, that's how it's always been, is if we release and abandon it, it becomes the property of the property owner, and then they can do whatever they want with it.
Okay, so in theory, like if, let's say 15% of the residents that had that going through their property came and requested us to abandon it, then the point at the state could still have an easement on 85% of it. Then is there still this liability or the obligation to upkeep or repair it? Or do we just know that the liability is gone because there's no water running through it? It's just a pipe underground.
That's a legal question. I'll defer to you, Fred.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and the liability continues as long as the pipe is there and it's owned by the state of Utah until it's released or abandoned to the owners. I've been working on ways. I've been wanting to figure out a way to abandon the entire pipeline in one fell swoop. I'm not sure if we can do that, but it's still something that I would like to see if we can do. But this way, where we do get approached, and we have been approached, and I should say this, and I think I did say this, but before DFCM was getting approached, we were getting approached by individual landowners, and we would work with those individual landowners to do this as well, or to relocate the pipeline. At this point, a part of the pipeline, so the pipeline is not being used. It has no function right now. There is no water going through it. It's capped at both ends and it's buried. And part of it actually has been removed, but we maintained an easement on the part that has been removed. So if we needed to, we could go back in and reconnect the pipeline and have it used. But currently the pipeline is not being used. And eventually, if we got, say, like you said, 15%, and then 85% were still remaining, I think over time either they would come and they would want it removed, or it would just stay there as an abandoned water pipeline buried in their yard.
Right. Okay, so then my last question is, since typically water rights are with drainages, has that point of diversion been approved? Oh, okay.
Yes, there was a change application done by Draper Irrigation Company. They already were taking water from the same source from Little Willow, and we did a change application to have them take the rest of the water.
And that's been proved up?
Yes.
I'm comfortable with it then.
Thank you, April. I'll tell you what, so we've had a number of legal questions, and I think our legal counsel, JC, has probably been listening to this discussion. JC, would you mind if we went to you and had you weigh in on this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that there are, first of all, thank you, Ron and Fred. Nice to see both of you. And this has been a really, really helpful discussion. My first question would just be to you all. I know that there is some urgency to the timing of this. And could you maybe give us a little bit more background on the timing of when you would need direction or approval from this group?
Yes. I don't expect this group to make a decision today to abandon the easement. I really don't have that expectation. But what my hope would be is that, I mean, I don't see this as an issue that this board has to be concerned with. If you transferred that right to DFCM to take care of, that would be my hope, because we would manage it appropriately and make sure all the loose ends were taken care of. The particular problem that we have to deal with today, about 20 years ago, this homeowner, Troy Dana is his name, went to get a building permit with Draper City, and they said, well, you can't build on that easement unless you move the pipe. So he went through the hassle, or not a hassle, but he went through the process of moving the pipe around the perimeter of his property. The easement description and the new easement description for the new, where the pipeline is now located, those two documents were never recorded. So he's got a problem. Now he's trying to build onto his house, and Draper City Building Department says, no, you can't do that because the easement has never been vacated and removed and replaced with your new description. So that we could do that pretty easily just with two documents and not really necessarily abandon the easement just because of that problem, if that makes sense.
It does. And what is his timing on moving forward?
Now.
Okay.
He wants to get his contractors in line and build something in a month or so.
Okay. So I will say, I think that the information that you provided has been very helpful. My recommendation to the board, and I see that April and the chat and others are comfortable with that, I think that would be up to the board. I would recommend, just given that we are currently having some discussions related to what our water needs may be, it sounds like this is something that we don't need to necessarily be concerned about potential water coming to the site. But before, I will say, as your counsel, I make that recommendation to you, I would like to have some offline conversations. So if there's something that we can do to help this homeowner at the moment, we can do that. But I would recommend that we bring this back next at our next meeting so that we can make a more definitive conversation. I'd love to have some conversations, Ron, with you and Fred offline to make a recommendation to the board.
Thank you.
Again, we'll defer to the board, obviously.
Thank you, JC. Ron and Fred, if we allow our legal counsel to work with you folks, can we maybe lay the groundwork to take official action at our next meeting? Would that be agreeable?
I'll defer that question to Lee and Jim.
Jim, is that agreeable?
Yeah, I just have a question. I'm not really sure what we're going to be looking at with the legal counsel. I mean, there's a lot of question on how we eliminate the easement, and that I don't think that's necessarily relevant to this board. I think the relevancy is whether the board sees there's value in the easement or not, and then they could direct DFCM to manage that into perpetuity.
So
there is no value to it for future water to the site.
So Jim, how would you feel if a motion was made, maybe along the lines where April was going, to have this issue delegated or assigned to DFCM, but to still leave our legal counsel in the loop, at least to make sure that we're okay?
Yeah, that would be great. I can make that motion if you want. Or
Okay.
April, yeah, she already has kind of.
So let me go to April and see. April, would you consider that motion, making that motion, so we can move this issue along?
Sure. So I'll motion that the research on the abandonment or keeping the easement, we'll move that research over to DFCM, who will keep our board legal counsel in the loop. And then when it comes time to vote or make a decision, they'll bring it back to the board.
Your motion is that we assign to DFCM the research and also the making the recommendation in concert with our legal counsel?
Yes. And someone can tell me if they want to amend that. If we can push the whole recommendation over to DFCM, I'm okay with that too. I just didn't understand if we can give them the whole thing to vote on it.
I think our board member Jim is suggesting that we turn over the decision-making to them as well on this abandonment, maybe subject to our legal counsel's approval.
Okay, so let's amend the motion that DFCM will also be able to make the decision on the abandonment, just keeping our legal counsel involved.
Motion is that we assign this matter, delegate this matter to DFCM to research and review, which they've done, but also to make the decision in concert with our legal counsel. Is that your motion?
Yes, thank you for wording that better.
That's okay. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that, Representative Snow.
Thank you, Jim. Further discussion to the motion? I'll place it for a vote. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries, and we've taken official action on that matter. Thank you very much for discussion. And Fred and Ron, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
So next matter on our agenda has to do with our guest, Rich Linder. Rich will make a presentation, a concept presentation. As Alan has mentioned, we have started to receive proposals for specific projects at the point. Earlier this year, we approved a process to evaluate project proposals. And notwithstanding this proposal you'll hear today, we'll follow that process. We thought it would be helpful in visiting with Alan, and I've had some discussions with Rich for this board to have an early preview of a life science campus concept whose scale and impact would really influence the direction of our discussion on planning. Let me assure you of a few points before we turn the time to Rich. First one is, this discussion today is for informational purposes only. Staff is not making any recommendations, and this board will not be making any decisions. The concept presented today could be refined to fit within the planning concepts of SOM, but that kind of detail hasn't totally been undertaken yet. We believe the concept can be complementary with the innovation district ideas that we'll hear on the next agenda item. So keep those points, please, in mind. And with that, Rich, we'll turn the time to you. Rich Linder, he is the founder and CEO of Zenter Inc. of Utah. It's a biotech company. And he's also the founder of BioUtah, the industry association for Utah's biotech and life science companies. So Rich, I see that you are with us, so we'll turn the time, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Representative Snow. It's a privilege to be here. I was trying to turn on my video, but it's been disabled by the host. So maybe we can, perfect. Hi, so I'm here. I have prepared a presentation I'm going to share, if it's all right for me to share the screen. Can you see that screen?
We can see your screen.
Wonderful. Well, it's a real privilege to be here. I'd like to thank the board and Director Matheson, Representative Snow, and all the people associated with this process. It's a tremendous undertaking. It's a thrill to see this land get developed. And, you know, a lot of the folks in the life science industry really believe that something that we could add to this unique development would be a life sciences campus. Similar to Silicon Valley, some of the components of Silicon Valley are the tech industry and the life science industry. And the life science industry would consist of medical device development, therapeutic drug development, and diagnostics, new diagnostics. And certainly, Utah has a very rich heritage of success with regard to all three of these industries. One of the things that we have in Utah right now, this is what Utah has. We have a great university. It's a research university and medical school at the University of Utah. We have surrounding higher education institutions, many of them located in Salt Lake Valley and Utah County. We have a highly educated workforce. We have Silicon Slopes. And as you know, we have BioUtah. What we need is a catalyst for life science investment, additional sophisticated private investment, more medtech and biotech industry, more higher paying jobs, location to attract and develop C-level talent in life sciences. And to the extent that we don't have that here, we can attract it. More globally recognized inducers that attract industry expertise. And I'd like to talk about one of those inducers or engines can be in this presentation. So Zinter Incorporated is a life science company. It is the first medical device, therapeutic drug, and digital health company. On our board of directors is myself, Robert Baxter, Jim Tobin, who was the chairman and, the chief executive officer of Boston Scientific, Baxter, and Biogen. Over the coming month and a half, we will announce additional board members who collectively represent the most important companies in the world. Our objective is to build a globally recognized life science company in Utah. And as many know, I've built a number of companies. I've sold those companies to the people like Johnson & Johnson, Boston Scientific, done deals with Abbott. And my personal objective is not to do that anymore. I think Utah can grow. So I'm going to grow this company and keep it. We're not selling it, and we're going to build that right here in Utah. And we would love for this to have a presence at the point without question, but there also should be other economic and business reasons for other people to come. I have been in Utah. I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Northern Virginia, moved here in high school, and I watched John Huntsman Jr. and Sr. contribute amazingly to this state. One of the most important examples I've ever seen is John Huntsman Sr. The Huntsman Cancer Institute and his charitable work at the university have left a lasting mark on Utah, and without question will advance cancer research and enable many patients to have a better quality of life. My objective is to do the same thing. My career has been spent in heart vascular disease, stroke, and neurologic indication. And so I plan to pick up some of the responsibilities based on that great example of John Huntsman Sr. I would like to work collectively with the state to build a world-class destination heart and vascular center, as well as a neurologic institute. As you know, heart disease is the #1 killing disease in the United States. It kills more people than all cancers combined. And its little brother is stroke, and stroke is the #1 leading cause of adult disability. And it's the most costly healthcare problem in America. And I would love to see that research done right here in Utah and expand our research footprint in the state. If you were to look around the United States, there are some major cardiovascular centers that are of tremendous import. Some of those include Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Ochsner, Columbia, Harvard, Brigham and Women's Hospital, Cedars-Sinai, and others. Certainly the University of Utah has made tremendous strides in clinical research and in patient care in many areas. And, I think John Huntsman Sr. has done a tremendous job in helping those patients who have cancer. I think that as we seek to build the University of Utah's global recognition in heart and vascular disease, it can be done right here at the Point. You need a lot of things if you're going to have a life science ecosystem. We can't just say that we're going to bring Silicon Valley to Utah. It's got to be done with a strategy. And I think that strategy's got to have a couple of things. One of them is translational research. We have to submit new therapeutic drugs and medical devices to FDA for approval. In working and collaborating with FDA, we test those devices and therapeutic drugs in an independent laboratory. Well, without question, the most important translational biomedical research organization in the world is likely CBSET, an organization in Boston that, with Professor Edelman, who's shown in the upper left-hand corner, interviewing President Bush and former Presidents Bush and President Clinton. Institutes like that are world-class, led by the top people on the planet, bringing them here to Salt Lake City, not hoping to grow, but actually bringing something here that is already at the top. Those are the types of things that we can do if we do creative partnerships with literally the most important places in the world for biomedical research. That's part of that life science ecosystem. A life science campus where you connect people, you live and you play. You do all kinds of things at these innovation centers. And it's not just a district, it is a place that is a focused strategic initiative. Universities are great at doing research. What we need is private investment. And, look, I went to BYU and the University of Utah. So universities are incredibly important at getting us ready to compete in the global marketplace. We need to partner with our universities, see them expand, help them to innovate and create. But frankly, universities have to enjoy and appreciate all of the inventions that come out of these universities. What the private industry does is it is very, let's just say, particular and specific in the technologies that are developed. These are technologies that we know have good global markets. Usually, look, my grandfather was the PhD advisor for Stephen Covey. Steve Covey wrote a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and one of those was Begin with the End in Mind. I don't start a company until I know who it's going to exit with, and I have a list of acquirers. I know what it's going to take to get this exited. I know who to work with, who's the best in the world, and then it's all about execution. And private money and private investment is what's built the industry in partnership with universities. But this is an opportunity for private investment. A heart and vascular and neurologic institute in a hospital. As you know, stroke, or as you may know, stroke is mostly 2 parts. It's hemorrhagic and ischemic. Ischemic stroke is what I'm talking about in particular. Ischemic stroke is heart disease or atherosclerotic related, whereas hemorrhagic stroke is usually the rupture of a blood vessel in the brain. So through heart and vascular research, we are solving 75% of strokes, which is the leading cause of adult disability and the most costly healthcare problem in America. This hospital would be one part of the life sciences ecosystem at the point of the mountain. And it's going to require a tremendous amount of philanthropic investment in order for this to take place. A world's leading biomedical research institute is absolutely essential. We've got to have relationships with the Food and Drug Administration, with NIH, and with the organizations that we work with every day that regulate our medical devices and drugs. We don't want to continue to exporting responsibility for developing our medical devices and therapeutic drugs and manufacturing them to China. We want it done right here in the United States. And the pandemic, if anything, has shown that we cannot be reliant on countries outside the United States that may not have the same objectives that we have in the nation. Bringing that research to Utah is vitally important. I've already am in talks with one of the world's leading biomedical research institutes. We met today here in Utah. We flew them over the valley, and they have a desire to come and be at the point. We flew them right over the prison, and they can see this vision, and we can do this. It's not something that is a bridge too far. This institute would create more business growth, enabling high value economic impact at the point with the highest paying jobs in the United States, if not the world. It would create a destination for biomedical research where innovation companies will want to move their operations to be closer to this business influencer. And by the way, I think companies west of the Mississippi would be willing to come to Utah from California, Asia, and the central United States, and even put unique characteristics in this facility that would draw companies from around the world.
So excuse me, Rich.
Yes.
I'm going to be rude, and so I'm apologizing in advance for that. But we have one more item on the agenda, and we're running really close on time. And I apologize again for conveying that, but if you could help us manage your time a bit, and I think the board may have some questions for you, but if you could help us move forward quickly.
I'll try and get through these remaining slides fast. The next thing that we would put, and thank you, Representative Snow, it would be an independent incubator for new medical devices, diagnostics, and biotech companies. And again, I'll skip quickly through the agenda. I've been following along, and I know you're running late. The next thing would be new world-class participants and services. So this industry requires corporate law, intellectual property law, public accounting firms and regulatory consultants, and also things like machine shops and software development and suppliers and contract manufacturers, testing laboratories and engineering design firms, marketing firms, raw material suppliers, and clinical research organizations. You also need, and I know that SOM and the board is looking at this right now, development, amenities and services for residential living, restaurants, hotels and conference centers, shopping and retail and amenities, cultural art and performing arts. This is typically a highly educated workforce that supports this industry, and they need and want outdoor art. They need and want museums and things where they can congregate outdoors. I think Utah is an amazing place for that opportunity. Things like museums and outdoor entertainment, and certainly rapid transit and next generation transportation services. More importantly than anything, new investment capital with venture capital funds, private equity funds, corporate venture investment, which would be induced at a location like this, along with other advanced research that attracts philanthropic investment into our community. Our strategy is the catalyst enabling long-term sustainable impact. It's the greatest benefit to the state. It continues Huntsman's legacy, has a lasting and significant impact that benefits our generations to come, and strengthens the state while accomplishing its objectives. It focuses on private investment. Life science investors back proven entrepreneurs who consistently generate results, and that those life science investors follow great scientists, and we want to bring them here. It also, great serial entrepreneurs and great scientists develop the greatest technologies, and I'd like to converge all of that at the point. If you look at all the key vision elements of the committee, what the legislature is asked to accomplish at this development, I think this checks all the boxes. And I'd like to thank everybody for allowing me some short time to make this presentation.
Rich, thank you very much, and apologize again for asking you to shorten things up a bit. This is really exciting, and I've heard part of this presentation before. But let's turn some time to board members for questions about your concept. See if anyone has questions.
I'll just add, this is April. Thanks, Rich, for that nice presentation. I think this is really interesting because we're starting to hear a few different sectors that want to move in here and some different companies that want to be in that area. For the last few years, we've always thought that it'll be a nice marriage between Salt Lake County and Utah County, kind of bringing the workforce for people who maybe don't want to commute all the way down to Provo or all the way into Salt Lake. There'll be a lot of people you can grab and a lot of college graduates from not just BYU and U of U, but remember we've got BYU, UVU, and Utah, and then Utah State. So really there's a lot of schools. So appreciate it very much. And fellow Northern Virginia girl. So just had to add that in.
In Fairfax County, right?
Arlington.
Thank you, April. Other questions or comments about this concept, or questions for Rich?
I would just say that to April's comment, the fact that you've got, maybe 100,000 university students along the Wasatch Front, as an industry, we need to be hiring these students. We need to be providing internships, partnerships for research. Medicine is very collaborative, and we need our universities, but we also have to bring in private investment. And I think this is a good strategy to utilize our universities.
Thank you. Well, Rich, I have a feeling that maybe we'll be circling back with you at some point. If you've heard part of our meeting, we're just in the early, somewhat of the early stages of planning, which would be important to see how that relates to what your concept is. So I have a feeling that we will continue to communicate with you. And thank you again for your presentation today.
Thank you. And by the way, we look forward to that opportunity and working together. And our team is available to do whatever is needed to support your committee. It's a very important process.
Thank you, Rich. And I know that you know our executive director, Alan, well, and how to stay in touch with him.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The final matter on our agenda is from our higher ed folks. Before I turn the time to them, let me just say that we are now just past the 4 p.m. time. And I hesitate to keep the board members longer, but this presentation is important. But I also want to be cognizant and respectful of your time commitments. So if any of you have to leave, I would certainly understand that. And I think our presenters would too. On the other hand, if you could stay, I think you're going to learn a great deal about what some of the plans are for this innovation district. You will recall that last fall we had kind of a prelude from our higher ed community. They met with our board and talked about some general ideas for an innovation district or research center at the point. Since then, they have developed those ideas further, and they also received an appropriation from the legislature to advance this concept. So with that, I'm going to turn the time to our board member, Commissioner Wolstenholme, Natalie Gochner, and Neil Abercrombie. I think we all know who they are, and ask them to update us on their progress. So thank you for our guests from higher ed for being here, and we'll let you proceed.
Thanks, Representative Snow, and we'll be quick, and we appreciate all of you sticking around. I'm going to make my comments quite short, and I'm going to turn over to Natalie and Neil to kind of update you on the progress that we've made. Again, we very much appreciate the support that we received from the legislature, both for ongoing and for one-time money, to really identify the things that should be included at the Innovation District at the point. As you know, we have some fabulous institutions in the state of Utah And our two research institutions have really taken the lead on this project. But we also want everybody to know that all institutions will be engaged and involved. We're just asking our research institution, because of their expertise in the particular area around innovation and what they've already doing at their institutions in research, to take the lead on that. So with that being said, and because we're short on time, I'm going to turn the time over to Natalie and Neil, and they'll give you a brief update of where we're at. And then obviously we can have a much more longer dialogue in the future. Natalie, do you want to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Representative Snow and others. Great to see you today. You know, the working title for this project is the Innovation District at the Point, and we've been capitalizing the, Alan. I thought you'd appreciate that. This is intended to be a dynamic hub of innovation that will leverage the strengths of our institutions of higher learning to do two things: create high quality jobs, but also address challenging Utah problems. And the way to think about this is to just capture this vision, right? It's a dynamic innovation district. It's at the point. It fosters groundbreaking research and technology commercialization. It solves difficult Utah problems and creates a more prosperous future for rising generations of Utahns. As you do something like this, we always want to have guiding principles. And we previewed these a little bit at our last time we met with you, but we fine-tuned them quite a bit. So number one, make sure we serve the public interest. And this can take many forms. This can be high quality jobs, you know, improved air quality if you're researching that. National recognition helps our state, improved quality of life, but serve the public interest. Take the long view in what we're doing here. This is really about the future. The commissioner mentioned that this is a collaborative university presence where all institutions of higher learning contribute. And I've been making it a point to say public and private. Everyone knows what I'm referring to when I say that. And then meet the market test. It's really important that this run like a business. And then, you know, under the idea of financial stability, attract a diversity of public and private investment. And I will mention that the University of Utah has had conversations with Rich Linder and some of the things that are being talked about there. And we welcome the ideas and the connection to the health innovation platform that we're going to show you in just a minute. Now, I'm going to characterize this as we're moving more to the execution stage. And that's why we wanted to show you this diagram here. It starts to give you a sense of how we're hoping to move this forward. So we recognize the governance of the Land Development Authority. We are actively forming a leadership council that would include our System of Higher Education chair and commissioner, the presidents of our land grant and flagship university, a trustee member from each of these, because like the commissioner said, the research university would take the lead, but invite all to participate. And then we would be reaching out to 4 at-large community leaders to help us be engaged with the community. This leadership council would help us set and refine the vision and really help with our community engagement. This third box down, the strategy team, this is where execution happens. We execute on the vision, we oversee work plans, and make recommendations to this group. We will be operating under the chairmanship of our Commissioner of Higher Ed. I have been asked, along with Jason Perry, to help from the U as vice chairs, and Neil Abercrombie from USU. We're going to turn to him next. We have platforms and advisors. So if you look at these innovation platforms, they're summarized here. There's just 4, and we're going to show you those in more depth. But we've got folks, people that we're working with on our campuses to be our platform leads. And then we have over on the right, these advisors that work across platforms, whether it's in tech transfer, research, real estate, some of the relationships on campus. And we really want to have a private sector connection and advisor here, so you can see that referenced. With that, I'll just show you these platforms of innovation, we're calling them. Now we're showing you 4 here. We have a completely open mind about additional ones, complementary ones. But these are the 4 that we're leading with. And Neil, I think you're there. I'm going to just turn to you to be on point to describe some of these. But as I do that, I'll cover Health Technology Innovation Hub because of the Research Medical Center at the University of Utah. But the idea here, right, is that we want to establish, research on cancer, mental health, cardiovascular, and be in a situation where we can take our data sciences, our population health expertise, our expertise in medical devices, regulatory compliance, diagnostic testing, whatever it is, and help with the treatment and prevention of disease, and help with healthcare access and affordability, the types of things that our state, that accomplishes the things we mentioned, creates jobs, high-paying jobs, and solves Utah challenges. Neil, I'm going to turn to you to help with the other 3 platforms.
Thanks, Natalie. And I'll just reiterate what you said. We'll be brief on these because this is going to be an ongoing conversation with all of you. It is certainly on our campuses, talking to our colleagues in research. In my opinion, the reason these 4 were elevated to the top to start off, as Natalie mentioned, not only do they address critical issues for the state of Utah, but they're areas where we have a lot of expertise and industry partnerships already starting to thrive. So on the Energy Innovation Center, this is a very broad concept talking about new areas of energy development, diverse energy development, everywhere from hydrogen, thorium, battery storage, other energy related research. You've heard a lot about maybe some of the transportation logistics, electric vehicles, infrastructure related research there. We've also talked about some partnerships across the state that would link into the point from Emery County or Carbon County and the San Rafael Energy Research Center and a few pieces there. Alan, the one that you and I have probably talked the most about is the 3rd platform we have listed here, which is air quality, challenges with our changing climate. We know that that's a major concern, and it has been a barrier for some economic development issues. So looking at a state-of-the-art climate and air quality solutions lab, obviously there's a lot of interest from our faculty on this one, both with research they're currently doing and how to help with initiatives around reducing emissions, human health, renewable energies on this one as well. And then the 4th one, which is a little bit unique, but it's been a real growing area, is on the outdoor product design piece, where we have a number of companies that have started in Utah, Cotopaxi, Icon, Black Diamond, others. We have a lot of demand on our campuses with partnerships around product testing, material testing, development. We see this as a potential that a lot of industry partners would have interest in the location of the hub there. We have really strong platform leads on all 4 of these areas, and we're excited to work together, the U and Utah State, and then reach out to our colleagues across the state to what they might add to it as well. And we anticipate there'll be other ideas that'll rise to the surface. So thanks, Natalie.
Great, Neil. And this is, I'll turn it back to the commissioner, but as you can see here, we've kind of got this task list, and we've assigned our platform leads. We've got the funding now to do some things. Our next steps will be to post and select a project director, select at-large community leaders for the Leadership Council, start to create that business plan that secures additional public and private funding. And then we're open to these additional platforms. Commissioner, I know we want to just take questions, but I'll go back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie, and thanks, Neil. Really appreciate the work that's been done on this from our 2 research institutions, and look forward to the many great things that will come out of here. And I think we can't speak enough about wanting to partner with private industry. We know in the education area that we need to do more of that, and we look forward to the point of being a great opportunity there within that hub to be able to do that. I think when research and education comes together with private industry, great things will continue to happen. So we look forward to having those opportunities as we move forward. So with that, Representative Snow, we can answer questions, or we can adjourn the meeting, whatever you'd prefer to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Natalie, Neil. Let's see if there are any questions from the board. This is really great stuff. Very exciting. Questions or comments from the board? we may, Commissioner, we may invite you all back periodically to get updates. At least that would be my impression, especially as we come together, because I agree with you that this will be a partnership between our private, our higher ed institutions and private capital. And so having you have exposure in the process is going to be really important. So I suspect we'll be having you back. And Natalie, let me just say, I really appreciate the third point of your guiding principles, which is collaboration with the other higher ed institutions. And you all know where I live and why that's important to me. So Dave, I know you're smiling because I remind you of that, but I just want you to know I appreciate that very much. We'd like to have all of our students, all of our higher ed have an opportunity to have some contact and receive some benefit there. So
Representative Stone, we 100% agree with that. And we think the real value here is obviously we're going to have some quality of life issues and some economic growth that's driven from the research. But what I would really love is the fact that we're going to have students that hopefully have an opportunities to learn with the engaged learning and hands-on. And we really want all of our institutions engaged and involved with that, even at the tech college level, to see where that partnership and where that can be, to where the students really do get some advantage of working really closely with our industry partners.
thank you. This is really exciting to see the higher ed piece of this development come into play. So thank you again for your presentation. Back to the board members, thank you very much for being here, for your time and engagement. We've got a lot accomplished here today and still have a lot to do, but your attendance and engagement here today is greatly appreciated. So with that, I would entertain a final motion.
So moved.
Was that you, Commissioner?
It was.
Thank you, Commissioner. Motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second, this is Mayor Ramsey.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. So with that, thank you again, and we'll catch up with you all later.